Today I have another pattern and tutorial for you for these really cute heart-shaped pillows. So I have one that's just plain old heart pillow, and then this one has a ruffled edge, and I do have the pattern for it for you guys to also make it, so I'll have it linked down below. But once you cut out the pattern, it is something like this. You'll have two pattern pieces, the actual heart of the pillow and the rectangle for the ruffle, and you'll cut out two of each. As far as what fabrics to use, you can honestly use kind of whatever. As you can see with this one, I used like a blanket fabric that I had left over, and this one I used a satin for. The one I'm gonna make today is gonna be with a cotton. You can kind of do whatever. I would say that if you want the ruffles to be a little bit more ruffly, use fabrics that are a little bit lighter weight. This one was a little bit thicker. I think this is like the most amount of thickness I would go for a fabric because it won't ruffle as much, but something as light as this cotton that we're gonna use today will ruffle a little bit better. You can't really ruffle with a fabric like this with like a blanket fabric, so this one would just have to be like a plain heart, but you can really get creative with it. I like to use this project as a scrap project, so using up all my scraps and random fabric pieces that I don't know what to do with anymore. Like this fabric that I'm going to be using today is from an estate sale that I got, so it's just like scrap fabric. It's nothing crazy. And for the actual filling of the pillow, I like to use half fabric scraps and half poly filling. So I'll show you what that looks like. This is the poly fill that I have. It's your most basic like pillow stuffing. I actually got this secondhand from a friend that was getting rid of it. She had done some like home project with it and didn't need it anymore, so that's what I've been using. But I use half of this and half of my fabric scraps, because if you make it fully with fabric scraps, it's really heavy and not super comfortable depending on the fabrics you use, but like it's not the most comfy. So doing half and half allows me to, one, keep that comfort and the integrity of the pillow, but also be able to use all my scraps and kind of make it a sustainable zero waste project. So that's kind of how I go about it, but you can also just do it fully in polyfill if you don't have fabric scraps or don't want to do that. Either works, but that's just what I do. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Once you piece together your pattern, it should look something like this. So all the little diamonds should align perfectly, and you'll have the heart and the ruffle piece. Now you can cut your two heart pieces on the fold of your fabric. And for the ruffle piece, if your fabric is not long enough to meet the length of the ruffle pattern piece, you can just patchwork your fabric together to create that ruffle. Since the fabric will be ruffled in the end, you won't really be able to see the seams of it anyway. Just make sure that you do add a little bit of extra seam allowance so that you don't lose length when you add that extra piece. So I added an extra inch to where I marked the cutoff of the original fabric so that it would account for the ½ inch seam allowance on either end of the fabric. And make sure to cut two of these pieces out. Now we're gonna sew that entire piece up. So firstly, sew those little bits to finish off your long rectangles, and then we're gonna sew together both of the long rectangles that we made, right sides together, ½ inch seam allowance all the way around. Now press all your seams open so that it's easier to ruffle and everything stays nice and flat. Take your ruffle piece and fold it in half, wrong sides together, to start creating the actual ruffle piece. I like to start by pinning the seams first and then pinning everything else all around. Once that's ready, take it to your machine, change the stitch length to the longest length, so we're gonna be basting it, and sew it at a ½ inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving some thread at the end and not backstitching. It should look something like this, and now we're gonna add another row of stitching just like that at the ½ inch seam allowance to create our two gathering stitches. It should look something like this. Now we're gonna align our seams with the bottom of the heart and the top of the heart. That way we can spread our ruffles out evenly. Now you can take the top two threads and gently pull on them and tug all the way around to start ruffling your fabric. If you have a gathering foot, use that instead, but I'm just gonna show you how I use this method because I know not everybody has a gathering foot. So again, just gently tug all the way around, move it all the way around. And once you feel like the ruffle length is looking correct to go all around the heart, you can start pinning it down. And again, you can kind of move the ruffles, even them out a little bit to make sure it's laying properly all the way around. Once that's ready, take it to your machine. I like to still have it on a long stitch length to baste it, and I'm gonna baste it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way through. Once that's in, I take out all the other basting threads that I can see since they're not really necessary anymore. And now we're gonna take our other heart piece and put it on top, right sides together, making sure to sandwich the ruffle on the inside of the heart. Once that's ready to be sewn, make sure you leave an opening about 2 inches on the side of the heart so that we can pull it out. You're gonna sew at 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way through. Make sure your stitch length is shorter now and it's not on a basting stitch. And before we turn the heart inside out, you wanna clip the top and the bottom to make sure that you really get that proper heart shape. Now you can turn the pillow inside out through the hole that we left and you'll start to see the pillow take shape. Now it's time to stuff the pillow, and obviously this is up to your liking. I like to do half fabric scraps, half poly filling, and you can make it as fluffy as you want, as limp as you want, I guess. It's total personal preference at this point. But once you have your preferred fullness, it's time to just close up the hole, which I just like to pin the seam allowance in and top stitch it on my machine all the way around to enclose everything in there.
Once you're fully done, your pillow should look something like this. I think they're so cute. Here's my cute little collection, unintentionally looking very Christmassy over here. I think these are so fun, so cute, a great way to use up all of your fabric scraps if you're somebody that keeps them like I do, which I feel like most people that sew tend to keep their fabric scraps. Even if you're not necessarily into sustainability, I feel like everybody's like, oh, I could use it for some project later on down the line, and then you never do. Yeah, this is a great project to actually use them up for. So let me know if you guys make these, send me pictures, I'd love to see them. I will have the link to the pattern down below if you want to make it yourself. And that is it for today's video. Let me know what else you want to see from me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!